I'm really excited to be with this audience virtually and excited to talk to startups as you are branching out into the actual creation of your idea, your dream, and making it happen. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about that is as it relates to data. So much of what startups are doing involve technology, data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, biometrics, facial recognition, you name it. These are the technologies that you're probably playing around with or thinking about with your idea. And if you haven't started thinking about them yet, believe me, that won't be long before you start to think about different ways that technology can assist your dream. I'm here to make sure that your dream is a dream and not actually a nightmare. And I have 3 tips for business owners and startup owners to start thinking about their data. Number 1, it's very important at the outset to think about the mission of your company and how data may play into it. I know it seems very early now in early days, but start thinking now about what data you would need to make your business successful. It could be customer data. It could be data that you need to build certain cases and algorithms for purposes of either deep learning or machine learning or artificial intelligence. It could be data just to figure out more about your customers and who they are. But think now about how data may play into your company's goals. Secondly, once you think about that, start thinking about how to map that data and know where you would want to place it. Where do you want this data to reside? Is it with another partner? Would you want to team up with another company? Is this a co-sponsorship you're talking about? Or is it actually acquiring different data sets or companies? Or is it about you purchasing data or getting a big enough group of consumers to be interested in your product to build out your data set? So give those things some thought about the data flows. That's sort of my second tip. And then my third tip is really think strategically then about the data. And along those lines, think about how to leverage it. And you will have done some of that already because you're thinking about your purpose and how data will fit into it. Think about how to get the data that you need. And then most importantly, make sure that you're not doing anything illegal with the data. And I want to pause here on that because there's been more than one startup that is accelerated, especially in this era as we're taping here in the COVID-19, where we are becoming so reliant on technology. And as we can see, just even from this virtual conference that we're doing, that we're relying on things like video chat like we've never done before. But you don't want to be that entrepreneur that ends up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, or the Financial Times because of some privacy incident or some kind of a data security, data breach disaster. It only takes a moment to really crash all of that wonderful goodwill that you've built up with your amazing idea. So really take the time to start thinking about and planning for your data strategy ahead of time. So you might be wondering, how do you keep into compliance? Maybe you're not attorneys. Maybe as you're starting out the business, you don't have the time or the ability or money to hire really expensive attorneys to help you figure out all these things. Well, I want to tell you about a number of resources that are available. There are resources through your startup programs. There are law students and other lawyers that donate time to clinics. And many law firms like ours have special programs for startups that qualify to get a certain number of hours free of charge. But really take the time to get the data privacy advice and get it right from the beginning. I can tell you one of the most important things for consumers these days, and we're seeing it all over the US, and particularly in California, where I'm from, but almost every state. There was a survey recently done by KPMG, and it was reported on in TechCrunch in the beginning of August, that 9 out of 10 Americans consider privacy to be a fundamental right. And they want to protect their data, and they want to know where the data is going. So first and foremost, for your brand, be transparent about what you're doing with data. And that requires the things that I talked about at the beginning. My first tip was really thinking about how you're going to use data. And the second tip was thinking about your data flows. And so my third tip here is just be super transparent about what you're doing with data. And also be sure to communicate that to your customer base so they know, either through a privacy policy that you post on your website or in your mobile app, what you're doing with data. And also, be careful and really transparent with your vendors about your data expectations in terms of what you want them to do with your data, and also how you want them to protect your data. And there are some states that do require that you have a written information security program, like the state of Massachusetts, or that you maintain reasonable security for data, like the state of California. Now, once you become super successful and you have a business that's up and running, it won't be long before somebody knocks on your door and wants you to go global. And I want to share with you that a global projection of your product and your services is amazing. But I also want to let you know that there are now, as of the end of December of last year, 144 countries with data protection laws. So that means that the world out there can be sort of a landmine for the unwary. We just, as I'm sitting here taping this, just about 3 weeks ago, we had news that 101 companies got lawsuits in Europe for how they were handling data, just because they had a social media pixel on their website, which most companies have. So just knowing that over there that might be perceived differently is important knowledge to have. By this point, when you're ready to go global, I'm sure that you'll have the resources to really be able to speak to outside counsel and get ready. But very important that you start thinking about that now. Finally, I want to share that there are 6 things that regulators really care about. Of these 144 data protection laws around the globe, they really boil down to 6 critical things that you can start thinking about on the compliance front. Number 1 is having somebody in charge of privacy and data security in the company from the inception. You want somebody thinking about that function and that role all the time. It doesn't have to be their full-time job, but it does need to be a part of their responsibilities. And there are a lot of toolkits out there about how to get a data protection officer ready for their role. Second, you want to make sure that you inventory the data, just like my second tip that I mentioned earlier. Third, make sure at the appropriate time that you do a legal risk assessment. And that's something that lawyers can help you with. But there are a bunch of other resources as well. Our firm at Perkins Coie, we have a privacy quick tips blog, which we call privacyquicktipsblog.com. And there's lots of good information there, as well as many other law firms that can get information to you about assessing the legal risks. For example, a year ago, I wouldn't have told you there were many risks in Brazil, but just in August of 2020, they just passed the most comprehensive data protection law, which is called LGPD, that Brazil has ever had. It's styled very closely to the European General Data Protection Regulation, which a couple of years ago was the most comprehensive data protection program and data protection and privacy law in the globe. So many things evolve, and it's important to stay fresh with what new jurisdiction might be important for your organization, but might have risks. So that's important for the third step, which is your legal risk assessment. The fourth step is take extra care with data that regulators and consumers consider to be sensitive. And that's data like financial information, health information, location data, and children, to name a few. But there are some specific categories of sensitive information that are laid out in the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU in Article 9. And also in California, we've got a ballot initiative at the time I'm taping this that will be going to a vote on November 3rd that has a special definition for sensitive data that looks a lot like the European definition. So it includes things like trade union membership, race, ethnicity, and biometric information in the definition of sensitive data. But anyway, you want to take special care in your sort of fourth step, take special care with sensitive data and make sure you've done an impact assessment to really mitigate further those risks. And then in phase 5, when you deal with compliance, make sure that you are targeting mitigation programs to mitigate the risk that you've identified in phases 3 and 4. So when you do your legal risk assessment in phase 3, you'll notice some risks. And then in phase 4, dealing with that sensitive data, you would have noticed some risks. In phase 5, you want to look at what systems you can put in place internally to mitigate those risks, internal policies and procedures, as well as external policies that you're telling the public how you're going to deal with those risks. Think about vendor management, what controls you need to put in place with your vendors, what needs to be in your contracts to mitigate those risks. And also think about training for your team. It's not just a good thing to do, it's also required if you're dealing with the 5th largest GDP in the globe, which is California, which does require training for employees that have to respond to consumer questions about data privacy. So in phase 6 is just keep an auditable record of all this, okay? So you can go back to it in a year from now or whenever you start a new product or service that might deal with data so that you can go back and tweak this and make sure that you've got it right. So those are my suggestions for keeping your company on the up and up and viewed favorably in the press rather than as a calamity. And so excited for all of you and what you are launching with your startup. Thank you.